Good evening and welcome to Pivotal, a Daria media production supported by the MacArthur Foundation. I'm your host, Nabila Usman. Many believe life as we know it has changed irrevocably, and that in this seismic shift lies an opportunity to turn things around, improve our world, and make life better for the majority. It is time to reboot Nigeria. This is Pivotal. The clamor for state police has been decades in the making, but remaining on the fringes of discourse throughout that time. However, as of today, 16 states have submitted their memos to the National Economic Council in support of state police. Over the last 10 years, an overstretched military has been forced to get involved in civil matters in an effort to police Nigeria. And despite the shortcomings of this arrangement, they're proving to be the last defense against anarchy. But there are serious consequences of our security failures, as we saw recently in Okwama community of Delta State, where 17 military officers were killed during a peacekeeping mission that experts say should have been handled by the police. Today on Pivotal, we begin by hearing from the governor of Kaduna State, His Excellency Governor Obasani, who speaks on his support for state police and why he believes that the time has come for its creation.
Talking about state police, I can say that it's my baby. And of course, why did I say that? When I was in the National Assembly, there's a 9th Assembly. I was the senator that sponsored the bill for the creation of state police in Nigeria. Unfortunately, we voted 21 to 19. 19 members from both the Senate and the House of Reps supported the creation of the state police during the constitutional amendment, but 21 voted against it. That was the reason why the state police did not scale through the conference committee that was in the 9th Senate. Today, most of us are agitating for the creation of state police. As a governor, today we're talking about, if you look at what's happening in many states, some governors, including myself, came with a stopgap measures. By creating vigilance services around our states, creation of vigilance services, many states call them what they feel is suitable for them, but whether you like it or not, there are still vigilance services. And of course, but what is the law backing them? Because like I said, for me, I always look at the laws of our country. And that was the reason why, again, let me take you back. When I was in the National Assembly, I was a senator that really actually sponsored the amendment of our Firearms Act. And why did I do that? The Firearms Act in Nigeria have been obsolete for over 40 years. And when you look at the Firearms Act, these vigilance services we're talking about, by law, they can only hold form actions. But then we're sending them to the bush to confront who? To confront bandits. These bandits, the minimum weapon they move around with is AK-47. See, sometimes in a country like Nigeria, we reduce ourselves to issue of ethnic, religious. I've been a governor of Kaduna State in the last months. Since I became governor, I have not had a single problem of ethnic or communal crisis in Kaduna. It's about justice. It's about fairness. It's about equity. Whether you have state police or you don't have state police, it's about a leader being fair. We don't say we won't do the right thing because we have very few disgruntled or people who might abuse a process. But we have to look at the bigger picture, in my opinion, because you see, a process can be checked. We still create a police where you can check the process. I'll give you an example. Where there's a conflict, federal police must override. That is what the law is going to be. It happens in America, it happens in other countries. Why can't it happen in Nigeria? Why are we thinking about religion, ethnicity? We pass that, in my own opinion. Let me be very frank with you. State police an idea that the time has come. I can tell you that it will happen by the grace of God, because we must find solution to this problem. We can't live in fear, live just sitting as leaders, imagining that something might happen, so we cannot act. We cannot do anything to solve the problem. We have a problem. We must find solution. This is the only solution. So everywhere in the world, that's what happened. But leaders must come and be bold enough to do what is right. And doing what is right is the creation of state police. And
That's Governor Obasani of Kaduna State sharing his thoughts on state police. One thing is clear, the current policing system simply does not work. But does the answer truly lie in the creation of state police? We attempt to answer this question with my guests, Romy Mom, who is president of Lawyers Alert and a former commissioner of the Police Service Commission. I also have with me Kabir Adamu, a security expert and the managing director of Beacon Consulting. And joining us on this conversation is Jide Ojo, a public affairs analyst. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Mr. Mom, I'll start with you. You heard the governor there. Do you believe that it truly is time to establish state police?
I think that's a hydra-headed question, as simple as it is. Police entails a lot of issues in terms of not just the training, but the equipment and all the sort that you need to, get the police involved with. And so you ask the question, do states or can states contain that? I think that's the main thing. Ordinarily, one will say, yes, it's time for state policing, and it should have been there for a very long time. But when you look at the fact that civil servants are owed loads of salary in the states, you begin to wonder, can the states shoulder police? Because at the federal level, with the police we have now, we are yet to get it right in terms of what it should be like and what it ought to be. And so when you think of cascading this to the states level, you are left with some sort of trepidation. How can states, besides Lagos and Rivers and Akwa Ibom, probably handle state police? So I think it's a question that is not a yes or no answer. There are a lot of layers and dynamics to the issue of state police. I would think, for me, that is a part we need to tread carefully. Let's get the federal police right. Because as it is now, there are a lot of dislocations and fractures, even at the federal level, which accounts for what we see today in terms of the high insecurity in the country. Now, if there's nothing to look up to in terms of models at the federal level, what are you going to transplant at the state levels? And you begin to wonder whether the clamor for state police is for other reasons other than, securing the Nigerian on the street. I think we need to be careful in this conversation of state police and all of that.
And so, despite your point, one of the more immediate conversations being had right now is legislation, right? An amendment of the Constitution to accommodate this. Let's talk about that. What are the hurdles that we would need to scale in order to establish it legally?
Yeah, because as it is today, the Constitution recognizes only the Nigerian police force. Now, if you need to create state police, it will mean we need to amend the Constitution, which means that clause or that section or that proposition has to be introduced in at least 28 states of the Federation and passed at that level before it comes back to the national level, and the two houses will have to pass it, and then the president assents. That's when you say you have amended the Constitution. So it's quite a Herculean task even at that level. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, once or twice conversations have started about this, but it's been killed even before it got to the level of states voting on it. I think for me, the conversation now should be, how do we secure communities through the federal police and through community policing? I think the economic position of our country and the investment that we need to make to have the police of our dreams at the state level that cannot be abused, or the federal level where citizens can truly be protected, will mean that what we should do is getting communities to secure themselves in collaboration with the police through community policing, where we do not invest as much money as we don't have now, and through that probably begin to see how state policing can come to being. Is something I see happening in maybe a decade or two from now? Yes, owing to where we are presently. So yes, it's desirable, but the question is, in practical terms, I really doubt. I think we should talk more about community policing as it is now, and we should also strengthen and make the federal police work.
So we'll come to explore your thoughts in a moment. Interestingly, the Inspector General of Police, IGP Egbetokun, has said that we need maybe 190,000 more police officers on the ground to properly secure the country. And Mr. Adamu, I want to bring you in here now. As far as the current conversation goes, it does seem like we're much closer to establishing state police than not, despite some of the reservations that have been raised. I'd like you to paint for us what it would look like if state police were to be established. What's the ideal?
Thank you very much. Like all federal systems, the idea of state police is to have, in the minimum, 3 levels of policing. The federal policing system that would have jurisdiction over certain policing matters. And then you now have a state-level policing system that would also have jurisdiction over certain matters. And then ideally, a local government policing system that would also have jurisdiction over matters. And this is what happens in most federal systems across the world. A good example is the US, the UK, the same thing. You've got those levels. In fact, in those instances, you can even have other levels. So you could go to a university community and you find a policing system within the university community. You go to the quote-unquote ward level and you find policing systems at that ward level. So it's simply a case of deciding the jurisdiction that policing system will have over if we decide to go that way. And I agree with you. I think in our recent history, this is one of the closest we're coming to having the reality of a state policing system. Let's not forget that I think in the First Republic, if I'm right, we did have a regional policing arrangement. So it's not that we've not experimented it. We did try it before now. And there were lessons that we learned, hopefully, from what happened during the First Republic and the consequence of that. And I'm hoping that as we go on this journey, perhaps those lessons will be taken into consideration when having the conversation. One of the things that I would say is also quite important in this matter is if you had read the Renewed Hope agenda of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, he was very clear there that he's supportive of the idea of state police. In that document and in other policy documents, he did speak about the El-Rufai police reform report. Unfortunately, I haven't seen that, and I've tried to also reach out to experts to see if anyone has seen that report. All I've been able to gather, it's an APC document, so it appears that it is at the level of the party that document was involved. But what the Renewed Hope agenda mentioned is the El-Rufai report. And then he also mentioned that there will be a harmonization of previous police reform efforts. In other words, while the El-Rufai report will be the guiding principle for the reform agenda of this administration, it would take into consideration previous reports. And there have been several reports, some of them remarkable. Point I'm trying to make is that the idea of a state policing system is not new. It's been there, just like my colleague has mentioned, but there were reasons why it was jettisoned in the past. And I think we've come to a point as a country where the current government wants to move that conversation forward. And so at the executive level, both at the federal and at the state level, there is consensus. And more interestingly, in the parliament too, there appears to be consensus. The debate, however, We were told, I think last week, that 16 state governors have submitted their report, and it appears they are supportive of the state policing system. Now, is 16 in this instance enough? Would a repetition of previous efforts also be the case in this instance, where if it goes to constitutional review and the required number 28 states, because 16 out of 28 will not get us what we want. So yes, I think it's a conversation that is actually started and that a lot of Nigerians are desirous of, and it's not out of place to have that conversation, because yes, we're a federal system.
So, I mean, from what I understand, expectations are that the remaining states will submit their memoranda at some point or the other. Mr. Ojo, I want to bring you into the conversation now. At the moment, there's a bill that's passed second reading, if I'm not wrong, at the House of Representatives. And if you look at the contents of that bill that's seeking to establish state police, it does indicate heavy, if you like, or very present federal form at one level or the other, right? So if there's a council or a board at state level, there's a representative of the federal government there. And it seems to defeat the purpose of states being able to independently secure their own territory. Do you agree?
Incidentally, I've not been opportune to read that bill, so I may not be able to speak to it. But let me, on a general note, let me intervene that I am for state police. I've written about state policing as recently as about 4 weeks ago in my column in The Punch. And even before then, I think we are being slave to our fears. We did in the First Republic. It was politicized. Politicians misused the police, and for that reason, we abolished it. But are the politicians not misusing or abusing federal police now? There are 25 federal systems across the globe. Only Nigeria has one central policing system. The United Kingdom, Dr. Adamu spoke to, is even a unitary system, but they have several layers of policing. The urgency of having state police is such that it is an antidote to an existential problem of our nationhood. Because bandits are running rings around our police and security outfits. And it's not their fault. We have a lot of ungoverned spaces. You just quoted the IGP saying he needs additional 190,000 men on ground. Even if Ashwaju goes by President Buhari's 10,000 policemen per annum, it will take 19 years for him to match that 190,000 that he needs. So how does he get a full complement of that without waiting for 19 years? Is by having a complementary policing system that can work with federal police. Incidentally, people have not advanced their minds to something that is already in place. We have state high courts, don't we? We now have state prison, don't we? With the last constitutional alteration that President Muhammadu Buhari did last year, he has moved correctional center from the exclusive legislative list to concurrent legislative list. We have state traffic management agencies. We have state, which other state institutions do we have? Several of them that are coexisting and playing complementary role to the federal agencies. If you have what I feel was a shortcoming of our
our experiment in the 60s, from up to 1966, January 15, was that we, politics at that time was highly ethnicized in such a way that the regional authorities were even more powerful than the central authority. And they feel that putting the police in their pockets is the answer. But they failed with that experiment in the Southwest because the failure to pocket the regional police in the Southwest led to Operation Wete.
Mr. Ojo, let me interrupt you for a moment. What you said has raised a couple of things, right? For one, interesting that when the federal government prescribed the bandit groups in the Northwest, one of the reasons, as we found out recently, is that the states were not fast enough or capable enough to prosecute these crimes that were considered crimes committed under the state, right? So the federal government needed to intervene. That speaks to capacity. Then you come to the matter of the regions in the 60s being more powerful. In this case, if insecurity or if security is local, isn't there a concern that you have 36 people that you then have to face to be sure that they're not being more powerful in one way, shape, or form than the center?
Well, I won't say it in that mode. What I think we need to do differently, the conversation should be what are areas of operation between the federal and the state. But beyond that, my learned friend, Romy Mom, raised the issue of funding. But it's not only funding that will be a potential challenge. But let me speak specifically to funding. There's nothing cast in stone. As you devolve more powers from the exclusive legislative list to concurrent legislative list, one thing that you cannot run away from is also the revenue sharing formula. It also has to give way and redistributed to give more state resources, to give more resources to the state. Because the reason why the federal government is taking 48% of the total revenue of the federation is because it has the biggest responsibility. So if some of its responsibility, like railway, like electricity, like prisons or correctional center, and eventually the police gets moved to concurrent, it then means that there will be need to have a revenue sharing formula reviewed in favor of the state. Apart from that, about 6 states also have launched what they call Police Equipment Trust Fund. Lagos, Ekiti, Delta, a couple of them have launched, even before the Buhari administration deemed it fit to have one at the center. So the federal government gives, not the federal government, I should say that every state governor gets security votes. These security votes now has to be properly accounted for as against the current situation where you get 2 billion, 5 billion without giving account for what you do with that kind of funds.
So we will come back to this conversation and explore other points a little more. In the meantime, we'll take a quick break. You're watching Pivotal. Stick around.
Every second and every minute, something new happens.
The Nigerian National Patrol.
The news breaks. Everyone wants to share it, but not everyone wants to dig deep. Now that's where we come in. We bring you the news and go beyond with in-depth conversations and analysis with stakeholders.
I honestly think that the federal government on its own part has...
We bring you the story within the story. And that's what makes us tick. We are Radio Now 95.3 FM Lagos, and we go beyond the news.
Galloping inflation,
Nigerian economy hasn't quite started.
rising insecurity, failing healthcare systems, and worsening education standards. With a population of more than 200 million people, how do we move away from business as usual? What should Nigeria do to pivot?
People are dying and suffering.
This is Pivotal, and I'm your host,
Nabila Osman.
On Pivotal, I discuss with industry players, policymakers, and individual Nigerians preferring alternative solutions to the issues. Catch Pivotal every last Wednesday of the month from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. on AIT.
Welcome back. This is Pivotal, a Daria media production supported by the MacArthur Foundation. I'm your host, Nabila Osman, and today's conversation centers on state police. Should it be created, or should we be looking elsewhere for the answers to our security problems? My guests are Romy Mom, president of Lawyers Alert and a former commissioner of the Police Service Commission. I also have Kabir Adamu, who's a security analyst and the managing director of Beacon Consulting. And joining us is Jide Ojo, a public affairs analyst. At this point, I would like to invite the audience here in the studio to join the conversation. We'll take questions, and then you can just stand up, you can identify yourself while seated, and then get into your question.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Gloria Ayanja Abraham. Okay, so my question is, some people remain unconvinced that the establishment of the state police would alleviate the nation's security challenge, as there's an argument that the state police will further empower governors to suppress their political opponents. Now we can see that politics is about to be dragged into this. So my question is there a reality in this argument? Like, is it going to be true eventually?
Thank you, Gloria. I'll take a second question before we return to the panel. I believe the mic's turned off. If you take a look. Start again.
Regime and maybe border security. How is there more coordination and cooperation?
I believe we have one more question from the audience, the gentleman in black and white here. Thank you very much for your questions. So I'm wondering how we share these questions. I think I'll start with you, Mr. Adamu, and perhaps we'll start with that last question. Very interesting, because when you talk about the 137 children who were kidnapped in Kaduna, they were rescued in Zamfara. And at the moment, we don't have an idea.
Rescue or release?
Well, That is, it's a good thing to note. But we don't know whether this was a crime that was done with different groups collaborating across state borders. One way or the other, it's a crime that crossed state borders. So it highlights the question that was just asked.
Yeah, and yeah, a beautiful question. So one of the things that I would always hope that in conversations like this is to start with a definition. In my honest opinion, the challenge we have in Nigeria with policing is that we haven't defined policing itself. What do we expect of our police? Why is it that we have a fractured policing system where you have the Nigerian police force, then you have elements of that police force outside it that are carrying out policing functions, but are not part of it. As an example, you have the anti-corruption bodies. They're essentially policing agencies. To an extent, depending on how wide you define policing, immigration is also a policing function. In certain countries, you have them in one. The road traffic agencies, at the last time, I think I counted about 3 of them. They are all policing agencies. Now, the irony of the Nigerian situation is that they are not just fractured, but they are under different ministries. So you have the Ministry of Police Affairs that supervises the inspector, the Nigerian police force, and then you have the Ministry of Interior that supervises the several orders, and then you have some of them reporting to the presidency, such as the anti-corruption bodies. So why I started with this notion, just to give you a sense, what I expect if we decide to go the state policing way is that the jurisdiction of all of this will be defined. But in this very befuddled atmosphere that I've just described, it beats me how we're going to extend that to the states. So that's why I agree with the initial comments by Romy, that perhaps we need to start with, let's clarify the atmosphere at the federal level so that we know what to expect from our policing. If we carry this very befuddled atmosphere down to the state level, then it will just be a repetition. It will be like you're using the basket. But I'm not worried about cross operational activities between the states. Once the jurisdictions are clarified, so as an example, organized crime that involves several aspects, it may be a federal issue. And then, of course, other more mundane criminal activities will be carried out. Just as an example, there is nothing stopping the states from cooperating among themselves. And I'm hoping that at the parliament, when they discuss this bill, at some point they would invite us to also come and contribute. Even if they don't include that, we would have an opportunity to advise them to say, okay, as part of the requirements, even if it's a checklist that should be contained in that bill, one of it would include cooperation among, even if it's at the regional level, because the truth of it is there are similarities in some of the security challenges between the regions. If you pick the Northwest, there are peculiarities in the security challenge. So nothing stopping them from cooperating. And in fact, they want to be successful. They need to cooperate in that regard. So I'm not too worried. My worry really is what we currently have. If this is the notion the governors have, that they want to carry what we have at the federal level to go to the state level, then I'm sorry. It's just going to be a waste of resources.
Thank you for your response. Mr. Mom, I'll bring the second question that was asked to you about how the different levels would interact with one another. I mean, it does speak to the law. And again, interestingly, when you think about the current structure, it wasn't too long ago that we had multiple security agencies coming to fisticuffs over jurisdiction. There was the incident in Lagos over the EFCC office, if I'm not wrong. It wasn't a very pleasant sight. Do you expect that we would have this, again, replicated 36 different ways?
I would like to say this first and foremost, that just saying let us have a state police is not a silver bullet that will solve the issues that we have now. And so the incidents of clashes, overlappings, and all of that will continue. It will continue. I would think that if you look at the Police Act 2022 that was reviewed just some years back, if we do actually implement that Police Act the way it's supposed to be, we are going to have notches up in the positive as to how this country is policed. There are some fundamentals that must be addressed. And my 5 years at the Police Service Commission, gave me a good insight into the fact that we have a police that is unfortunately not tendered to or not looked after. It's just, let's have police and that's it. From recruitment to promotion to discipline and all of that. Now, if you're going to have the sort of police that we have now at the state level, the problems will continue. I would think we need to implement the law as we have today. Get more boots on the ground. By the United Nations standard, our police officers are far, far, far below the number. In fact, the 190 as stated by the IG is still a far cry from having police officers where Nigerians can feel their presence and feel safe. Today, you have sometimes in the entire local government as small as 12 police officers, in an entire local government. And even the 12, what they have are possibly 4 or 3, do I use the word guns? If they are guns and all of that. And you also have manual policing, where we are not thinking about the signs and all that. So what I'm saying is this: if we have a human rights trained police, sensitive police, boots on the ground, equipment and all of that, the IG, the AIG, the zonal commanders and all of that, it flows down to communities. And if we decentralize funding and not just put everything in the IG's office, but see that AIGs, commissioners of police and all of that are also given the necessary funds and trainings and all of that, we will not be talking state policing. My fundamental fear for state policing is this, or for state police is this: how will Taraba State or Niger State, how can they have the kind of police that their citizens would want? It's very dangerous to give someone a gun legally and not pay the person's salaries. Yes. It's frightening to think about it. Don't get me wrong, sorry. I think state policing is important. It should happen. My take on this is not now, not where we are at the moment.
And Mr. Mom, I'll come back to you on this point, especially when you speak of the local governments and how many police officers they have, because it does speak to the level and presence of governance in those spaces. But Mr. Ojo, I'd like you to take the first question that was asked, and it returns to the points, some of the points you were making about our history, our historical journey. Again, how to ensure that these governors don't abuse the power. The question was on political persecution. I think back to Governor Sani, and he is of the belief that if it's in the law, if it's a constitutional mandate, that these governors will have no choice but to stick by it. But politics is not the only thing. You also have ethnicity, you've got religion. All these things fuel persecution in one form or the other. Again, do you think that they can handle that? How do we ensure accountability?
Again, I will answer with this adage that a man that is down will not fear any fall. Nabila and all of us seated there, how safe are we? With bandits operating with impunity across the length and breadth of Nigeria. We are in a national emergency. I'm not saying we should not cross the T's and dot the I's and think about human rights abuse and all of that. The courts are there to do substantial justice. Whether we like it or not, the state high courts have been in existence for over 30, 40 years. All the state institutions have been working. We have State Civil Service Commission. Why is every civil servant not federal workers? Why do we have state workers? Why do we have local government workers? Why is everything not centralized? We centralized it thinking that that is the silver bullet. Did you know that in the First Republic, we used to have independent candidacy, we used to have regional parties, we used to have so many things operating at the regional level. And some people came up and said, oh, see, this Ojuju Calabar is because of this regionalization that is our problem. Let's nationalize. So we nationalize all political parties. We say all parties must have office in Abuja. What is the quality of their offices in Abuja? How many of them wins election across the 6 geopolitical zones? I'm not saying there will be no problem. Life is created to solve problems. And we cannot run away from the fact that we need to confront this monster called insecurity. When we wait for the ideal time, maybe you and I will not be we will not be alive. I'm not trying to be a doomsday prophet, but what I see and the kind of helplessness and hopelessness I see in our military and in our policing authorities in Nigeria, we are in a worse situation. Okay, we have drafted the Nigerian military into all the states to help in policing matters. Were they created? Dr. Dalu, was military created to deal with internal? I mean, I can go on. The bottom line for me is this. Let the law be there for the establishment of state police. Let there be a caveat. You only establish when you have the resources to have one. It's not mandatory. All of them must. If the law permits you, the law is signed in 2024. If you feel you want to join in 2030, it's your bit. You can wait till 2030. States that are ready, because
Mr.
everything.
Let me
land on this thought, Nabila. Everything, our economic growth and development is based on how secure we are. The Punch newspaper last week reported that 165 farmers have been murdered, and they have paid how many billions as access fee and harvest fee to bandits. And we think we just want to have a central policing system, just have more boots on ground, deploy somebody from Sokoto to Bayelsa, a riverine area where
let me throw in a few instances for you. At the moment, in the Northwest, we saw the creation of the Ansakai, who are essentially a vigilante group. But we also saw that vigilante group rear its ugly face with ethnic profiling that exacerbated the security situation in places like Zamfara. Zamfara has become something of a lightning rod for insecurity in the last at least 8 years or so, maybe more. So in a situation like that, I still come back to it, how we avoid it. I understand what you're saying, but there is this other danger that we have to face, and I don't know that we're having the conversation on how to actively, proactively avoid that issue. Please.
You're right. We've reflected on the danger of vigilantism in Nigeria. And it's a danger that, for me, it's even more dangerous than the banditry that Jide Ojo is talking about, for the simple reason that the premise upon which the vigilante groups are created is a faulty premise. And so, as an example, in Zamfara, the idea was that it was a particular ethnic group that was primarily responsible for the crimes. And so when that vigilante was created, that ethnic group was not allowed to participate. I can cite a few states in Nigeria that if you create a state police, the likelihood is that a particular ethnic group would dominate that state police. And the likelihood is that that ethnic group will seek to achieve political domination using the power, the authority of the police, and of course political authority. So these are dangers that we need to address. And if we shy away from them, we're going to create 36 different monsters that as a country we cannot deal with. Yes, I agree with you. The federal system has its own challenges, but those challenges are hinged on lack of accountability. the point you made around the bandits cohabiting and having control in forested areas, for God's sake, there is an agency of government that has mandate over those forested areas. What have we done to that agency of government? Nothing. So are we going to shy away from solving the problem and then go and create state police with the belief that that's the magic wand that will solve the problem? No. I'm very happy that in the Renewed Hope agenda, I'm referring to it again, the elements of diversity, equity, and inclusion are mentioned principally there, and we've been promised by this administration that they would govern using those 3 principles. So again, like we've, I think, discussed earlier on, we are supportive of state policing. As a federal system, we should have state policing. But what are those instruments that we should put into the state police? Are we at that stage in our national development where we're ready for it? No. We first need to. I mean, one thing we've not discussed here in this conversation is how do we strengthen democracy at the state level, where we have emperors as governors. Forgive me for using those words. But unless we change that, where we have state legislatures that are powerful, and that can check the excesses of the executive arm, unless we have a judiciary at the state level that is, even if it's not 100% independent, but at least 75% independent, that can check the excesses of the governors, then we will not have diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's a monster that must be tamed.
Let's take a quick break. When we return, I'll take final thoughts from each of you. I'm sure there's a lot you have to say. Pivotal goes on a short break. When we return, the conversation continues.
Every second and every minute, something new happens.
The Nigerian National Patrol.
The news breaks.
And angry mobs decided to bomb.
Everyone wants to share it, but not everyone wants to dig deep. Now that's where we come in. We bring you the news and go beyond with in-depth conversations and analysis with stakeholders.
I honestly think that the federal government on its own part has...
We bring you the story within the story. And that's what makes us tick. We are Radio Now 95.3 FM Lagos, and we go beyond the news.
Welcome back. This is Pivotal, a Daria Media production supported by the MacArthur Foundation. I'm your host, Nabila Usman. Today we've been discussing state police, its potential, and really what the potential successes could be, but also the potential ills. And is it really the answer to the insecurity we're facing at all levels? My guests on the conversation today, Rami Mom, the president of Lawyers Alert, and a former commissioner of the Police Service Commission. I also have Kabir Adamu, who's a security expert and the managing director of Beacon Consulting. And joining me on this conversation is also Jide Ojo, who's a public affairs analyst. Gentlemen, as I come to your final thoughts in today's conversations, Mr. Mom, I would like to hear some of the things that you've mulled on, but I'd also like you to touch on whether the state houses of assembly have displayed some sort of capacity to take on the task of legislating at whatever level they would need to legislate if we see state police come into creation.
Yeah, so let me go to my final thoughts before this. I think the issue of community policing and the frustrations around it arise or is coming to fore because of the insecurity at the local levels, within communities and all of that. My take is that if the structures of the Nigerian police are activated and funded, if the law, the new Police Act is also implemented that talks about community policing and is so structured and is graphically created, and if it's followed, you're going to have some sort of, enhanced security within communities. I would think that we should focus more on the law that we have now, which is the law that legislates for community policing and also says that policing structures from the federal level to the state and zonal and community levels should also be strengthened. If we do that according to the law that we have now, then the issue of community policing or the issue of state policing will come to bear at the time it should when our democracy is strengthened, which brings me to the issue of the States House of Assembly. Because as it is now, we have seen States House of Assemblies, and most of them, forgive me in saying this, display complete subservience to the executive when they are just told to impeach this person, and that's just what they do. It's an order, a directive from the governor, and it has to be done. Or when they come together and then you find maybe 5 or 6 of them out of 23 saying they have impeached a governor because someone from somewhere is, pulling the strings. There is that lack of independence or political maturity to legislate and conduct themselves in the interest of the people. And so, except democracy is strengthened at the local level to that extent, you are likely to have state police also used in the same manner. And that's the fear. And when this thing starts at the local and community levels and is multiplied by 36, if we think you have anarchy today, we're going to have a doomsday. I think for me, what is important is to implement the new Police Act that has been passed, and more than 10 years or 8 years down the line, some police officers don't even know what it's about. Let's implement the new Police Act.
Thank you, Mr. Mon. Mr. Adamo, as you speak on your final thoughts, perhaps you'd like to also expand a little more on the importance of the independence of these different arms of government at subnational level, but also still stressing on these ungoverned spaces, which are also as a result of the lack of local government, which is also somewhat subservient to the states.
Yeah, thank you. Our democracy lies on the principles of check, balance, and of course other elements of that. But I think the one that we're speaking at the moment is checks and balance, and the ability of the three arms to relate very well, to be independent, and then of course to apply their mandates in a manner that serves the interest of Nigerians, I think is what is absolutely important. We've had a situation in Nigeria today where at the state level, the two arms of government, the legislature and the judiciary, to a large extent are being controlled by the executive arm of government. And I think that's what we need to change. It's not going to happen in one day. It's a process that we must start discussing. In conclusion, I think as Nigerians, we need to show up. We've spoken about the ungoverned spaces. There is, those ungoverned spaces are essentially forests that, if you look at in terms of jurisdiction, most of them belong to the state. The infamous one that everybody speaks about, Sambisa Forest. Sambisa Forest belongs to a state. As Nigerians, we need to show up for ourselves. We need to speak up. Why is it that a state has such a vast land and is not able to use the vast land? And frankly, it's not doing anything about it. There is no part of Nigeria you go to that you don't find those type of ungoverned spaces. The governors need to start applying their thought processes, using their heads. In today's world, you can actually, Amazon today, the discussion is how do we pay Amazon for environmental protection? So why can't we harness our own in such a manner that the world realize we have forested parts that we can actually receive money from? The immediate past administration under the vice president started that conversation, but we've let it die. So my point is, as Nigerians, we need to put pressure on our governors. They need to show up for us so that the ungoverned spaces, it's not police that will protect the ungoverned spaces. It's the governors that would have to make those ungoverned spaces economic zones for our own use.
Thank you, Mr. Adamo. Mr. Ojo, and in your final thoughts tying to this contribution by Mr. Adamo, you've stressed that you think it's important that we establish it today, essentially, right now. I wonder if you think that it will perhaps push the Nigerian citizenry, residents of states, to be better at the demand for accountability from the state governors as opposed to looking to the center all the time.
That is embedded, and like I said earlier on, you cannot have state police and a governor will pocket 2 billion, 5 billion as security votes that nobody knows what he does with it. Because corruption is at the center of our insecurity. some years ago, I read in the papers, Mr. Ibrahim Magu, when he was ESSC chairman, spoke to the governors. He said, I have security report that some of you fuel insecurity and conflict in your states because you want to increase your security vote. I don't know whether anybody else read about that. And I was shocked. So a governor will deliberately orchestrate insecurity or conflict so that you will say, the 1 billion I'm collecting is too small. So you see the enormity of the challenges I'm facing, so increase it to 3 billion. This is the time for accountability. If we do eventually create state police, we must not forget that the federal police will still be existing. It's just going to complement. It's not to compete, it's not to substitute. We are talking of more boots on ground, and I've spoken to the issue that you are saying you need 190,000. Unfortunately, something that rankles me was the infighting between the Police Service Commission and the Office of Inspector General of Police. We were facing an existential problem of insecurity, and these two institutions, if I can call them institutions, were dragging themselves to court, up to Supreme Court, to resolve who has the right to recruit constables. That is to tell you that even with over 60 years of policing at the center, issues like this are still unresolved. But we need to spell out what will be the areas of authority, the crimes that states will be that will be under state, the ones under the federal, the one. And lastly, let me say this: local government autonomy is also very important. Financial and administrative autonomy for local government, so that they can help.
I sense we should return to this conversation at a later date, but you've spoken quite passionately and importantly on this. Thank you so much, gentlemen, to each of you for your inestimable contributions to today's conversation. And a quick recap, right? There is consensus at both executive and legislative levels to establish state police. At least that's what it seems to be. The government must, however, fix the challenges facing the federal police system before diving headlong into establishing state police. Still, in the points that were made today, state legislatures must be empowered to check potential abuse of power by state governors, and a successful state police must be adequately funded. And that's this month's edition of Pivotal. I'd like to extend a thank you to my guests on the panel today and to the audience in the studio as well as you at home. And of course to the MacArthur Foundation for its support. Join me next month on the 24th of April as I discuss with another set of Nigerians implementing unconventional ideas that have the power to change our country for the better. I'm Nabila Usman. Good night.